Alright, this is just a little short intro. I put the Bill of Rights at the beginning of this so people could reference it quickly, and then if they want to stick around, they can watch the some of the things that led up to the Declaration of Independence that I go over, and the U.S. Constitution. So that stuff follows the Bill of Rights, and I'm just going to read straight from the Kindle version of the Bill of Rights that I have. Alright, so enjoy. This is not the easiest thing to find anymore. They usually just package the Constitution by itself, minus the first 10 amendments, which make up our rights. So you gotta sometimes search a little extra for that. I wonder why that is. Hope it's not lost. In fact, I think the one thing you can get out of what I've been saying is that if we all collectively recognize the fact that they are operating as if there is no U.S. Constitution and that there is no Bill of Rights, the overwhelming numbers of us demanding the return and the restoration of our Constitution is enough for us to be victorious in that effort. Now, let me make sure I get this right here. This is the Bill of Rights. The United States passed by Congress September 25th, 1789, ratified December 15th, 1791. Number 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people, peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Number 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There is no getting around that. There should be no standing army. There should be a regulated militia. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against the unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. You can't just go willy-nilly and use it as a fucking skeleton key. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, unless on the presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces, or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Number 6. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Number 7. In suits at common law, which we don't have anymore, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of a trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Number 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Number 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed or to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Number 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. There you go. If that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. I don't think you can have a country and feel freedom without those things being very well preserved and defended. And you can't. Even we did all right with just the appearance thereof of these things, so that we at least believe that they were real. Now we just have to fight to make them as valid as they once were. Once we do that, go play with your kids. What else do you need? Okay, so without trying to sound too rude, this is going to come out of the I bet you didn't know this shit section. This is from the book Andrew the Great, The Heroic Story of Andrew Jackson That They Don't Want You to Know, and that is from Michael S. King. The Currency Act of 1764 was a British law that imposed a monetary policy on its American colonies. The act extended the provision of the 1751 Currency Act that forbid the colonies from issuing debt-free paper currency as legal tender. It made them have, usury money. So basically that's what that's saying. This created financial difficulty for the colonies. Benjamin Franklin, the colonial representative, urged the British to reject the Currency Act. The Currency Act created tension between the colonies and Great Britain. When the First Continental Congress met in 1774, it strongly objected to the act as subversive of American rights. It is a little-known fact that the American Revolution, that the right of the colonists to issue debt-free currency and to spend it into circulation as opposed to a private central bank lending debt currency into circulation, was one of the causes of the revolution. So what's going on to us right now since 1917? We should be revolting, guys. So March 5th, 1773. The Boston Massacre. Tensions mount as 5 American colonists are killed by British troops. The increase in British troops stationed in Boston led to tension with the locals. Fights erupted between soldiers and liberty-minded civilians. British troops were sent to Boston in 1768 to enforce the Townshend Act, a series of laws passed by the British Parliament. The purpose of the Townshend Acts was to make colonial governors and judges independent of colonial control, to enforce compliance with trade regulations, and to tax the colonies without their approval. When an angry crowd of colonists, most likely led by provocateurs of a secret society known as the Sons of Liberty, and they also say Freemasons, confronted a group of soldiers with taunts and snowballs, the frightened British soldiers overreacted. Shots were fired and 5 American colonists died. The embellished news of the Boston Massacre served the purpose of spreading the revolutionary spirit throughout the colonies. Now that is a very simplistic, simplified depiction of the Boston Massacre. There was a lot of different elements in there that if you actually knew them, you'd feel even more patriotic afterward. And I'll devote, when I have all the facts together, I'll devote more time to that. But I've seen there's a lot of undercurrents to that, and the Sons of Liberty get a little bit too much credit. It makes it seem like it wasn't a people's protest, and it was. So that it's not just like some secret society trying to cause trouble to start wars. That's not what that was about. A lot of people have used that detail to make a whole lot of propaganda. So basically, trying to devalue the fact that we had a revolution to begin with by saying it was a British created revolution, which is complete nonsense. So December 16th, 1773. The Boston Tea Party. Colonists rebel against British taxes and monopolies. This is also going to be very simplified. This is like the Cliff Notes of history, but at least they're real ones. The Boston Tea Party was an action by Boston colonists in the British colony of Massachusetts against the British government and the monopolistic East India Company, which controlled all of the tea shipments coming from the colonies. After officials in Boston refused to return 3 shiploads of taxed tea to Britain, a group of colonists dressed as American Indians climbed aboard the ships and destroyed the tea by throwing it into Boston Harbor. I bet you they were able to become governor after that, though, because they didn't do blackface. That's still the governor of Virginia. Yep, just checking. The Tea Party was the culmination of a resistance movement against the Tea Act, which had been passed by Parliament in 1773. Colonists objected to the Tea Act because it violated their right to be taxed only by their elected representatives. The Boston Tea Party was a revolt against state-sponsored monopolies, British East India Company, as much as it was about taxation. It should be noted that As was the case with the Boston Massacre, the Sons of Liberty orchestrated the event. Members of this organization include Sam Adams, John Adams, and Paul Revere. Lexington and Concord. American Revolution begins with a shot heard around the world. So guys, the reason why these colonies that we lived in were here to begin with is because they were getting away from a very controlling, very totalitarian absolutism of the monarchies, and that was fueled and propagated by the church. So you're talking 1517 is when Martin Luther hammered his 95 Thesis on the door, and that was October 31st, 1517. So there were about 17 years from then that the counter-reformationist Jesuits were created by Ignatius Loyola. The Society of Loyola, or the Jesuits, aka the Society of Jesus, sprung from that, and they were counter-reformationists. So all of the Protestants, all the people who wanted to have self-determination and basically created the colonies and revolted against the British, all of us were considered, reformationists by the church, and the war was already going on in Europe ever since the Society of Jesus Jesuits were created. So they followed us here. Alright? They were causing trouble here, they were causing lots of things that happened, and then they infiltrated our government, and now they're the deep state. So, moving right along, I'm going to skip over Midnight Ride, Paul Revere, I don't care. Redcoats are coming, we get it. Declaration of Independence aside, written by Thomas Jefferson and signed by 56 patriots, the Declaration of Independence officially broke the colonies away from Britain and set forth the ideal that governments exist to serve the people, not to control them. That was first hinted at not more than just hinted at, in the Magna Carta, which was in the 1200s. America's founders believed that the rights came from God, not government. Prosperity followed when the power of the state was limited. Small government, God-given rights, morality, stable currency, respect for private property, and minimal taxes represent the opposite of what the Rothschild Internationalists and latter-day Red Revolutionaries advocate. When he says Red Revolutionaries, he's referring to communists. And who created communism? The Jesuits. Who owns the Rothschilds? They're basically the money lenders and the money changers for the Vatican, right? So the Rothschilds, they work for the guys who are really in charge. These lines of the Declaration sum up what America and the 4th of July are supposed to be about. The 2nd of July is when they basically ratified the Constitution, but it wasn't completely accepted in final draft until the 4th by Congress. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, consent of the governed, or consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. And that's where we are right now. And that's what we should be doing, and should have been doing for the last 20 damn years. Jefferson, rights come from the Creator, not the state. That's a nice summary. Okay. Drafted during the early years of the war and ratified in 1781, the Articles of Confederation and Permanent Union established a very decentralized government for the colonies. Under the Articles, the colonies, now referred to as states, were sovereign entities. For 6 years after the end of the war, the colonies were not truly a united nation, but rather a league of allied states living under mutually agreed upon rules. America's founders were divided. Though all of them believed in freedom and limited government, one camp, the Federalists, wanted a stronger central government to help organize the nation's affairs. The other camp, the Anti-Federalists, feared that any centralized American government might become corrupt and dangerous to the liberties of the people's liberty. The Us Constitution is ratified, the United States is created, 1788. Some of America's founders believed that the Articles of Confederation were too weak for the government and the new nation to survive. For this reason, the Continental Congress approved the U.S. Constitution in 1787 in Philadelphia. Months of contentious debate followed before the states ratified the Constitution, the framework of the federal government. The checks and balances built into the Constitution established 3 branches of government: and limited the power of each. George Washington was chosen as the first president. The document also limited the power of the masses of the people. The founders knew that pure democracy would result in mob rule. You get this? Pure democracy is mob rule, in which the majority of people could manipulate, can be manipulated into voting themselves the wealth of their fellow citizens, which is what they do with, government programs and things of that nature. Under the Constitution, taxes and state spending were minimal, and only gold and silver coins, hard money, were recognized as currency. There was no authorization for income taxes, central banking, and welfare schemes. Yeah, imagine living there, but having it be in modern times now. The Constitution and its original 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were designed to serve as a leash on government growth and power, and a guarantor of personal liberties, such as rights to free political speech, to own firearms, and to be secure from unlawful searches and seizures. Similar to pre-imperial Rome, the United States is founded as a republic, rule of law, not a socialist democracy, rule of manipulated mob. Even with its strict limits on government power, patriots such as Patrick Henry of Virginia viewed the new Constitution as a potentially dangerous power grab. Yeah, they were even worried about that, because back then people were very skeptical because they were very smart and educated. They knew how the system would be messed with. And you know what? Hamilton is a piece of shit. And we're going to get into that right now. 1790, Jefferson and Hamilton clash over central bank. The proposed Bank of the United States was to be a central bank with a 20-year charter. It was a brainchild of New York banker Alexander Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, no it wasn't. He was an agent of the Rothschilds. It was the Rothschilds' idea. That's the city of London was giving him the structure that he was supposed to go to Congress with and come out with a central bank. Mr. Hamilton, born in the British West Indies and educated in a Jewish school there, was an operative of the New York London money lenders. Thank you. He had previously founded the Bank of New York in 1784. As President Washington's Treasury Secretary, Hamilton clashed with Secretary of the State Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton and the New York bankers believed in strong central government and debt-based central banking and currency issue. Yeah, because they were playing a scheme. Virginians, Jefferson, James Madison, father of the Constitution, and others believed in decentralized government and local banking. Jefferson argued that centralization of power away from the private mints and banks was unconstitutional and dangerous. He wrote, "Banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies." And also, the modern theory of the perpetuation of debt has drenched the earth with blood and crushed the inhabitants under a burden ever accumulating. But the New Yorker Hamilton argued that if the... Don't call him a New Yorker. But the New Yorker Hamilton argued that if the nation was to grow, it needed a standard coinage and a money lending system supported by a central bank and an excise tax. Yeah, he was saying, you're weak, you don't know what you're doing, you're on weak legs, we're just learning how to walk and all this other bullshit. He was such a fucking manipulator. He wanted mercantilism, that's what it was. Alexander Hamilton's reasoning behind this bank was because he was going to get, even though he already owned a bank, the New York Bank, he was going to use mercantilism to get himself filthy, disgusting rich. And it was a British form of mercantilism that he was going to establish here. He had so many co-conspirators in London, it was disgusting. Alexander Hamilton was London's banker boy. Yep, Thomas Jefferson wanted no part in European central banking. Hamilton wins! A U.S. central bank is established in 1791, and the whiskey farmers rebel. President Washington listened to Jefferson's and Hamilton's position on the central bank, but was ultimately taken in by Hamilton. The father of the United States had a blind spot when it came to a smooth-talking, foreign-born deceiver. Others were not so easily fooled. In later years, President John Adams described Hamilton as the most restless, impatient, artful, and unprincipled intriguer in the United States, if not in the world. Along with establishing an excise tax, the Bank of the United States was a private company with foreign shareholders. To cover the government's interest payments to the bank, Hamilton imposed an excise tax on whiskey. So they were only imposing taxes on consumable goods at that point. They weren't doing income door-to-door yet. When Pennsylvania whiskey farmers rebelled, Hamilton convinced Washington to allow him to personally lead 12,000 troops to enforce compliance. The threat of brute force was used to collect the taxes needed to pay the interest to the foreign shareholders. When men were men, angry whiskey farmers attacked, tar and feather Hamilton's tax collectors for the central bank. The 5 sons of Rothschild spread their money lending empire across Europe. Okay, great. So I'll throw this in here somewhere. The Federal Reserve System, a privately run central bank established in 1913, grew out of the 1907 crash and panic that they caused. The
that they caused. Yes, it was a money panic that they caused. Months before the panic, banker Jacob Schiff issued a prophetic warning of what was coming and what would be needed to fix the very problem that his gang actually engineered. Schiff: unless we have a central bank with control of credit resources, this country is going to undergo the most severe and far-reaching money panic in its history. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in iniquity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money, and with a flick of a pen they will create enough money to buy it back again. Take this great power away from them, and all great fortunes like mine will disappear. For then this would be a better and happier world to live in. But if you want to continue to be the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, then let bankers continue to create money and control credit. That was Sir Josiah Stamp, director of the Bank of England, speaking at the University of Texas in 1927, only 10 years after the Reserve. Everything went to shit after this war. The bankster papacy stranglehold was predominant. Snowballing from this war debt, the banks controlled who won every consecutive election thereafter. They injected even more counter-reformationist communist delegates into our structure of government and seized the justice system so they could operate as they pleased, using amendments to give off the appearance that we still had a living constitution, meanwhile undermining its core values with every successive amendment. The bank's papacy used their media, their political agents, and their corporate reps to cause false currency panics that led to the misinformed public to demand some form of regulatory system. About 20 years later, the falsely named Federal Reserve Act was pushed through Congress during a holiday when barely anyone but their affiliate reps were present to decide on it. It's a common tactic today. Abraham should have been tried for treason and crimes against humanity and God's creation. The man was a demon with demon generals Sherman, Sheridan, and Grant, causing rape and murder as they burned down every house, killed every bit of livestock, wholesale robbed and looted, and burned all food providing crops in every southern community they passed through. It's called the War of Attrition. They tortured and starved unarmed, non-hostile men, women, and children. And that, my friend, is a fact. But you can't stop lying to yourself and thinking that this country still has a constitution, because obviously on a daily basis they show you just how much that means to them and how much it protects us. Okay? It's there so there's no panic. They put it up there and they make it look like, hey, there's a constitution here, this is your constitution. Let's talk about, like, on a daily basis on the media now, we talk about constitution this and constitution that, when in reality it was murdered after the Civil War. Actually, during the Civil War. The Civil War was the death of our Constitution. So, as time goes on, it erodes and erodes, and they put more amendments that should never have been able to be allowed to become amendments, because you can't nullify the original contract. That's not what an amendment is supposed to do. It's supposed to expand upon the definition of the original contract, if necessary. If necessary, and if more than, it should be more than 3/4 vote. It should be like 90%. You know, it shouldn't be. That means 75%. A C. You getting a C on a paper is enough to get an amendment. That's pathetic. You know, when they still gave out grades in school,